My name is Scott Napolitano. I got involved with this story when I was still a film student at Trenton State College in 2002. My senior year, we had to do a thesis film, and my group mates had suggested doing some kind of a ghost story, and that's when I heard there had been a murder back in 1977 in an empty theater on campus, and a pretty sadistic kind of murder. So I started going through microfiche, and I finally found an article talking about the case, and it was unsolved. I know I have no claim to being a detective, but there was something about it that intrigued me, and it became, how can I possibly solve this? It was Sunday night, after Labor Day weekend, before school had started. College before school technically starts, pretty quiet place. Janitorial staff would have been there to clean up. There would be grounds crew coming in to make sure everything looked good for the students. There were campus police officers working.
I was a campus police officer at the time. I was 22. We weren't expecting a busy night. You just ride around, do your patrolling, and that was it. No student calls, nothing like that. My shift started at 11 o'clock. I'm driving on campus past the theater. As my car pulled up, my headlights captured a bicycle that was chained to the railing right here. I could see that it was a female's bike. No one was supposed to be on campus for another 3 to 4 days. I called it in. I asked the dispatcher, was anyone supposed to be in the building at this time? They said negative. I said, I'll be going in to investigate. I unlocked the door, which was locked. I came in. I turned my police radio down, not to make noise, because I'm looking for a trespasser. And the lighting was only by the red emergency exit signs, and that's it. So it was kind of an eerie glow. Kendall Hall, it's kind of a very spooky setup because it's such an old building. There's like small cavernous type hallways. I listen, don't hear anything. I proceed toward the main stage. And I saw what looked to me initially as a person would be sleeping on their side with a covering up to their neck. I started thinking, is this a prop? I start walking closer to the body, and as I'm halfway there, I could see a large amount of blood. And then I crouched down, got real close. I knew it was a person at that point. The only thing led me to believe that it could be a female. In the caked blood and everything, I could see an earring on one ear. I grabbed onto her wrist. It was cold. It was hard. Felt like rigor mortis was already in the arms. I drew my weapon. I didn't know if the person was still here. And then I called it in. I told our dispatcher, send me a backup, notify Ewing Police. I believe I have a homicide victim on the stage. At that point, it was dead silence for what felt like eternity, because they've never heard a call like that come in. That's when every Ewing cop that was working that night, everyone came onto that stage, walking around, sergeant, everybody. When Ewing Police showed up, no one knew how to turn these lights on. So they got a hold of the electrician for the college. He started throwing all the switches, lit the whole place up. It was a gory sight. There was a large amount of blood all over the head. Her face was distorted.
She was covered in a piano blanket. Her clothes were found a few feet away by the piano, along with her belongings. They were able to eventually get an identity from her driver's license in her bag. It was Sigrid Stevenson, 25, a music major at Trenton State College.
When I heard that Sigrid had been murdered, it was heartbreaking to me. The Stevenson family was a very close family. When Sigrid was killed, her parents lived in California, and she was killed 3,000 miles away, back east. The first thought that I had was that I hope they will make it through this, because she was such an elemental part of that family. I was 2 years old when I first met Sigrid. We grew up in Livermore, California. We were born 1 month apart, so she's 1 month older than I am. She had one younger sister who she absolutely loved. Sigrid's personality, the best word I can use is quirky. She could be really funny, and she could also be silly. I remember watching her take little pretzel pieces and throw them up in the air for Penny the dog, and then she'd throw one and catch it in her own mouth. Sigrid was a piano prodigy. When she would play the piano, a completely different side of her would emerge that was just calm and powerful. I did not know any other child that could be handed a piece of difficult music and given a few minutes to literally look it over and then sit down and play a pretty reasonable version of it.
At Trenton State, Sigrid was pursuing music and education for her master's degree and wanted to become a teacher.
I know she was driven to accomplish and just become the absolute best pianist and musician that she could.
My name is Julia Caldwell. I'm a retired detective from Ewing Township, New Jersey. The first time I actually heard about the Sigrid Stevenson murder was during one of our blocks of instruction on cold case homicides. It is a cold case that spanned over 40 some odd years. I dreamed of being able to solve a case like this, specifically this case, because when I looked at the crime scene photos, I was horrified. This was a very messy murder. And I wouldn't be lying if I told you that it didn't keep me up certain nights, because I did become a little bit obsessed with it. And I feel like this case has done that to a lot of other investigators.
The piano was like right around this area of the stage. Her body was found about 4.5 feet away. I was 8 years old when Sigrid was murdered. In 2003, I was a sergeant for Ewing Police Department. And every day I went into the station, I'd open that door, and in the back of the room to the left, I would see Sigrid's 1977 case file. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder if we have any evidence from that case. So I wrote a letter to the chief of police at the time and requested to work on the Sigrid Stevenson case. The initial investigators in the case had retired at that point in time, and I had a long process of putting things together. I read through every file, things written on back of notebooks, inside of notebooks.
I got involved with the investigations in the time frame sometime around the late 2013, 2014. We had like interview notes who police talked to, but just no real chronological order of things they did or what they were kind of keying on. It hampered us from the beginning. We just had to kind of break everything back down and try to go from square one. While the original investigation was going on, the medical examiner at the time, Dr. Ahmad, responded to the scene.
My name is Dr. Rafat Ahmad, and I was the deputy medical examiner at the time the incident happened. I remember it well. The scene was very bloody. Her scarf was in a pool of blood. Her one earring was broken off and was found in a pool of blood. Her panties are off. Her blouse is off and it tied around her mouth so that she wouldn't scream, most likely. It was one of the most gruesome murders. The autopsy was done the following morning at 10 a.m. On the external examination, I found lacerations on the back of the head, deep lacerations on the front of the face. The cause of death is the massive craniocerebral trauma to the head. She was beaten very savagely and repeatedly with a blunt object. It could be a baseball bat, it could be a baton, it could be a pipe, and there was bruising on the body, on the thighs. That pelvic area had bruises. I took vaginal swabs. There were no live sperms there. It was dead heads of the sperms. It tells us that there was some kind of sexual activity was there. And if you add on all the other things that happened to her, we can surely say that this could be the result of the sexual assault that she had. She was found at 11:30 p.m. that night. And the time of death can be approximated between, I would say, 7:30 to 10 p.m. that evening she was found. She lost so much blood and she died within minutes after being attacked.
Looking at the crime scene photos, this was violent. There was blood everywhere. It would have been on the killer, on his clothes, on his hands, on his shoes. There was also blood spatter on the music that she was playing.
The fact that you see the blood, I would believe that there would be some type of footprint or something left at the scene. We don't see any of that in any of the crime scene photos that were taken. Not even walking away, leading away, nothing. Also, I'm kind of shocked that there was no fingerprints, no partial prints, no anything. It's kind of intriguing that we didn't find them, not one.
That's a mystery in itself. I don't know how the killer pulled that off and why there's no footprints. He's getting the piano cover, wrapping her up in the piano cover. Looks like he's trying to drag her into a different area.
As far as the suspect trying to clean up afterwards, there's nothing. There was no smears in the blood like you were trying to wipe blood up. No indication of any of that.
The murder weapon was never found. They checked the lakes, they checked around the surrounding area around the building, they checked the campus in general. Nothing. So, out of the gate, even within the first couple of days, there's not a lot to work off of.
Now, we know by the autopsy report that Sigrid was murdered on September 4th, but on September 2nd, she had just got back from a trip in which she hitchhiked through Nova Scotia.
Sigrid was lined up to have a room with a local fireman's family. By the time she got back from her trip, that family was going to be going on vacation down to the Jersey Shore. And they weren't going to be able to let her stay there until they got back in a few days. So Sigrid decided, I'll stay in one of the buildings over on campus and I'll practice the piano and I'll just crash on a couch. So she was staying in Kendall Hall over Labor Day weekend. Kendall Hall was known for being easy to sneak into, that the doors didn't close all of the way. The green room was fairly well stocked. There was a couch downstairs.
The last time Sigrid was seen was on Saturday night, September 3rd.
There had been a play which was being put on by a local theater group in the Black Box Theater, which is adjacent to the main theater space in Kendall Hall.
On Saturday evening, before the play started, one of the cast members walked into the green room and turned the light on, and Sigrid was startled. Other cast members saw that she had her backpack and sleeping bag with her in the green room.
Sigrid had been in attendance for the production. An actress ended up seeing Sigrid kind of watching the show from the side.
Later on, during the play, one of those witnesses in the cast stated that Miss Stevenson was happy and friendly and talkative. That was at the end of the first act.
And sometime afterwards, she ran into her again, and Sigrid seemed a little down.
She was explaining to this witness that she had gotten into an argument with a man, and that ultimately she lost the argument. This interaction most likely was with somebody who was there. May it be a cast member, may it be a stagehand.
So whatever good spirit she had been in, somehow she'd encountered somebody who brought her down. Who's she fighting with? Less than 24 hours after these arguments happen and after the show's done, Sigrid's brutally murdered. It could have nothing to do with that, could have everything to do with that.
Then that particular witness last saw Sigrid after the play had ended around 11:30. And that was the last time that she saw the victim alive.
After that, she sort of disappears. She could have been there on that stage practicing piano. Or she could have gone out wandering during the middle of the day and gone out to eat. We just don't know. Unfortunately, we do know where she ended up.
So if we look at the stage, the piano is right in this area. The victim's body was face down, partially covered by a piano cover. I strongly believe that she's on the stage and the perpetrator comes in and she's here at the piano, sitting on a stool. They knew she was gonna be there. They knew she was gonna be alone. They knew that the building was gonna be empty.
I believe the killer came in with the intent of having some kind of sexual encounter with her. He probably made advances on Sigrid and she rebuffed them, and he became violent.
He takes it out on her with some sort of blunt instrument, striking her multiple times.
It was an overkill. She was beaten so bad.
I think she tried to get up, make a run for it, at which time he struck her violently, maybe once, maybe twice, knocking her scarf off of her head, which was located in this area over here, along with a piece of jewelry of the victims.
I could see that there was some smear marks too of blood that made it look like she was either dragged or was being moved.
There was also ligature marks on her wrists. The ligature marks, they're all symmetrical, which leads me to believe that she was restrained with handcuffs.
To me, the ligature marks revealed something more sinister. May it have been a fetish, may it have been that that person likes control. Most sexually driven crimes are about control. You don't come in to rob something and all of a sudden, oh, let me bind them and take all their clothes off and place their body in a very revealing position.
When you look at the crime scene photos, you can see there's interrupted pattern of blood on her right side of her back, where her arm could have been in this position, where she's in a handcuff position. With her last breath of life in her, it looks like she drug her hand across her back and reached out to try to crawl away, try to get help, but that's when she expired.
The person who perpetrated the crime was able to leave undiscovered, most likely covered in blood, and was able to disappear into the night.
Obviously, when word gets out, and just based on the location, how it happened, a lot of people were upset and alarmed.
There was a lot of coverage in the newspapers from the Trenton Times and the Trentonian, and even the Daily News had picked it up for a brief while. It's scary stuff, because no one expects to start their first week of school with a huge police presence.
Detectives from Ewing Police did a ton of interviews. They probably spoke to 100 people, police officers, witness, family members.
The investigation was initially broad, looking at a lot of different people, but it narrowed down and seemed to focus around suspicions that campus police could have been involved.
A lot of people theorized, oh, it must be law enforcement because, they have handcuffs.
It's not a high percentage situation where you're going to come stumbling across a girl on a stage of a college campus and you're just so happy going to have handcuffs in your pocket. Unless you're law enforcement, campus police.
Also, looking at the photos from the autopsy, you can see where the long cylindrical strike marks that were on her back could very well be indicative of a police nightstick or a baton.
Campus police officer would be a good suspect because he knows the campus. He knows Kendall Hall. He knows that the campus is pretty much a ghost town at this point in time. And also, he knows that Sigrid may frequent these buildings. Sigrid had a reputation for sneaking into buildings. She might be in there sleeping, playing the piano. The campus police had interactions with her over the course of the year, chasing her out of different buildings. Ewing PD investigated the campus police officers. 15 officers gave statements throughout the investigation.
There were a lot of officers who were asked to be polygraphed. The results were either inconclusive or the people were deemed not to have been involved.
I did give a polygraph to Ewing Police. A number of our officers did also. They took our handcuffs and nightstick and they sent it to state police for examination.
They tested the batons and handcuffs looking for blood. They did find blood on one of the handcuffs from one of the officers, but it was determined that it was from an incident sometime prior. But not finding the blood on any of the batons or handcuffs, it's a situation where somebody could have washed it off. I'm not sure what the process was in 1977, how good it was, how thorough it was. We don't know. From everything I know, 2 campus police officers were on duty at the time of the homicide.
They both passed a polygraph, but then a couple months after Sigrid's murder, one of them was talking to another officer in the locker room at the police station and basically said to him that he had killed Sigrid. The officer who heard it thought he was kidding, but yet went to the detectives that were involved in the case and explained there's been a couple incidents with this guy where we've been at parties, he's been drinking a lot, he's been mean to women that were at the party.
He wasn't on my shift. My shift started at 11 o'clock, so I'm not in the locker room with him at the same time. So it wasn't me that overheard it. But I was a friend of his, We'd go out, go to the college pub, but he had a little bit of a peculiar disposition about him, especially when it came to women.
The officer passed the polygraph, but everybody passed the polygraph. Now, my feeling on polygraphs, if you look back at other cases over the years, you've seen the killer pass the polygraph. It's an investigative tool, but it's something that you shouldn't lay your hat on.
This officer, he was on campus at the time, but there was nothing in any report or the statement that they took from this officer indicating or asking him any questions in regards to the comments that he made about killing Zigard. I'm not sure if it was followed up and it just came down, it was a joke, or he was just made an inappropriate comment. I just don't know.
It seemed like, reading the statements from everybody during the investigation, that they did look at a second officer of interest. This officer came in 12:30 in the afternoon, the day of the homicide. Now, he comes into campus police headquarters off duty. Why does he do that? Maybe just to walk around, catch up on reports, but it's something that I know over the years, I have never went into the station off duty. It's a little bit of an oddity here that definitely raised some eyebrows. But the original investigation has a statement from him and also a polygraph, which he passed.
If you just look at the bare facts, campus police had keys to the building. They had restraints on them. They had the opportunity to interact with the victim. So yeah, it's pretty easy to look down the path of could it have been a campus police officer? But there's no evidence to any of it, so you can only theorize.
When I first got involved with the case, I had an opportunity to speak to one of the initial detectives on the case, just kind of get a feeling, a background from him about what happened. But one thing he kept harping on was that an individual by the name of Chuck may have been involved. I found out that Chuck was an actual member of the play that was going on the 3 days prior to Zigard's death. During the investigation, they recovered a playbill that Zigard had, and in the playbill circled was Chuck's name, and underneath written was, "Nice man, gave me a beer." At one point, Chuck, I guess when they were getting ready for the show or whatever, he went downstairs to the green room and did see her sleeping on the sofa and had woken her up. He spoke to Sigrid. We don't know what the extent of the conversation was, how long they talked, where they talked, any of that information. To me, it establishes that she had contact with Chuck, whether it was for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, a half an hour, however long it took her to drink her beer. We know Zigard was involved in an altercation or some kind of argument with somebody. Now you're thinking it could have been Chuck.
All the details are interesting enough, but then I find out what was his role in the play. Oh, he was dressed up as a cop.
When we found out he played a security officer and his props were handcuffs, baton, police uniform, obviously it sets off some red flags and you're like, hey, wow, this is interesting. Just based off what I read through the case folder, when they took a statement from him, it was very limited, but there was no evidence, just the investigators' gut feeling that this guy was involved. I don't see anywhere where they secured his props from the play and had them tested to see if potentially the victim's blood could have been on him. Also, Chuck passed a polygraph, and at that point, there was no other follow-up with him. So you have all this circumstantial stuff, but no evidence.
So this is the part that everybody knows about. This is where the crime's happening.
Yeah, pianos. When I was working at Zigard's case, I had the opportunity to meet Scott Napolitano. Scott did a ton of interviews, a lot of legwork in this case.
I've worked with campus police and I've worked with Ewing police off and on pretty much out of the gate. And I know I have no training. I don't have a news affiliation. I'm just someone who cares. And as I started to come back with more information and more questions, it seemed like they started to trust me a little bit more.
Scott's initial reaction after talking to a bunch of people was, I really think this Chuck guy had something to do with it. The fact that he was in the play, all the little pieces kind of were pointing to him.
Prior to meeting Pat Holt around 2011, 2012, I had put out a note on the New Jersey message boards, and I explained some of the details of what had happened in the case, and if anybody was interested, to reach out. And I got an alert, and it said, I think I know who may have done this. And the poster said, I think it was someone I dated in the 80s. Okay, well, what about him makes you think that he could have done it? And they say, oh, because he said that he'd killed before and could do it again. That's enough for me to sit up and take notice. So the poster, who I found out was named Susie, and she said, my ex was involved with the play. And her ex was named Chuck.
After speaking to Scott, I went and spoke to Chuck's old girlfriend, Susie. She did relay to me in the statement that I took from her. There was some incidents of abuse.
In 1987, I was a single mother. I met Chuck. We started a relationship, and I eventually moved in with him. He became extremely abusive. This one night, after I had experienced quite a bit of abuse, is when he said to me, I could kill you and get away with it. I've done it before. And that's when I got scared, and I started to think about all the things he told me about him being afraid of the police.
I'm starting to think, okay, Chuck is starting to check off a lot of the boxes, but I needed some kind of evidence.
Back in 1977, even though the scene was covered with blood, there was no testing for DNA. It was not available at that point in time. So 30 years later, we took evidence, vaginal slides taken from the autopsy that had possible DNA, and submitted to the New Jersey State Police lab.
We did get some partial profiles, but nothing that could be used as evidentiary value at that time. Then a couple of years later, we honed in on the red blouse that was wrapped around her head by the suspect. There was 2 or 3 knots that the blouse was tied in. And they were actually able to open up those knots, and they were able to get a partial male DNA profile off of the knots. The DNA profile that was found on the knots was from skin cells that were left behind during the process of the knot being tied off.
It was a situation where we need a suspect's DNA to be able to match.
I still felt Chuck was a pretty viable suspect, and so I was trying to get enough probable cause developed to get a sample from Chuck before I actually went and tried to speak to him.
Then in 2016, Chuck passed away.
I got a hold of a biological family member out of state, explained to them, what was going on, and asked them if they would be willing to provide a sample for us to compare to what we had. Chuck's brother agreed, and a few months later got the results back that the swab did not match. So that pretty much ruled out our suspect, Chuck.
Getting a call from Pat and hearing it's not him was a rough moment. You're back to square one, and you're looking at everybody all over again.
When I took over the case, it in October of 2018. And that's when I started looking at specific theories of who could have possibly been the assailant. I knew that they needed access to the building. I knew that they had to know their way around the building. I knew that they probably needed a key. I started going through all the files, and I got down to roughly 12 individuals who met that criteria. And then as I went through the files, I started eliminating those people. And at the end of my investigation, I felt confident that I had discovered 2 very viable suspects. The first suspect was a part of the production of the play. He worked in lighting. When she was discovered in the dark, but she had to have had some lights on during that time in this pitch black theater. The lighting is very tricky in there, and if you don't have that knowledge and expertise of the building, you're not going to be able to even turn on basic lights. So I looked at the lighting guy, and I noted that he had intimate knowledge of the lighting system and the infrastructure of the theater. He was described by one particular witness that his mood had changed drastically during the time of the play.
Also, in statement, the lighting technician claimed not to remember they had the keys to Kendall Hall, and then it had to be pointed out. And they still had the keys.
It's pretty cut and dry to me if I say, hey, do you have keys to the building? And you say no. To me, that's not an omission. It's a lie. Why are you lying about something like that? He was polygraphed and passed the polygraph, and he did provide a statement. But I don't believe that he was really taken serious as a suspect at that time. The second suspect is a maintenance worker at the college.
The janitors are interesting candidates because they do match a lot of the needs for a suspect in this case. They had keys to the building. They would have had exposure to Sigrid because she's sneaking into the buildings.
The maintenance person worked in one of the buildings that was a music building that the victim frequented. And he had a history of letting her in the buildings when she wasn't supposed to be in there. And at the time when her property was inventoried, the maintenance workers' contact information, an address, phone number, were found amongst her possessions. So he had a relationship with her. It was unknown if it was anything intimate. Other witnesses had reported seeing them together, including campus police officers. He was known to really go out of his way for her. Also, what concerns me is that he was fired from the college shortly after a lot of this occurred. He was going through some substance issues, and he went to like a detox program. The maintenance worker was not polygraphed according to documents that I reviewed. And poring over these files, he was not investigated as thoroughly, I believe, as I would have investigated him. Unfortunately, I had to take an early medical retirement due to injuries sustained while performing in the line of duty. So I don't have access to the files anymore. However, I do hope that the next investigator who takes on this case, I would like to sit with them and give them a background on why I would like them to look at these 2 individuals, because I strongly feel that one of these suspects could have killed Sigrid.
I started looking at this case as a curiosity of what happened in Kendall Hall, but as time has gone on, it's curiosity mixed with with empathy for Sigrid, because it feels like she was sort of left behind, and her whole life then became this compacted story that you tell freshmen on a ghost tour. To be left behind and essentially forgotten, that doesn't sit well with me.
Sigrid carried a diary around her pretty much wherever she went. She wrote a lot about where she went, what she did.
One of the most difficult things reading through her diary is her last thoughts that she wrote down. Her last entry is September 3rd. It's 11:43 p.m. They're breaking down a stage and they're gonna turn the lights out and it's gonna be dark here in Kendall Hall. That entry will never leave my mind. I always thought it was a little chilling to be able to read her last thoughts, knowing that it's gonna be dark soon, 11:43 p.m., and there's nothing else.
This is where the actual
There's
play
some
would have
play
been,
was?
yeah.
Yeah.
So this is one of the last places that people would have seen her alive.
Live.
My ultimate hope for the case is that if the word gets out enough people share what they remember, and that some detail that they were too hesitant to bring up gets brought to the police.
It might jog somebody's memory. Oh, I saw so-and-so the day after the play, and he was throwing out a bag of garbage, and I thought that was really strange. I really believe that this case is solvable, and it will be solved.
I got involved with this because it was a ghost story and I was making a movie, but I'd like to think that Sigrid's been watching the investigation and maybe sticking around because she wants the story told. Sigrid deserves justice.
This case is personal. Just something that stayed in my head and stayed in my heart. I started with this case, I was 21 years old. Not knowing we would be here right now. It's not fair that a 25-year-old girl was snuffed out here 46 years ago. She should still be with us today. That guy shouldn't be here. He shouldn't have been able to walk free for 46 years.
I think it still really matters for the many of us that were in her circle of friends and family to know that she matters enough that this will be pursued as thoroughly as possible. We need to find out what happened here and bring some belated justice to this family.
Every morning, I can wake up and I look out my bathroom window and I can see the campus. I live right across the street and I say good morning to Ziggy every morning. And I tell her that we didn't forget. We're still looking.
This story begins with the discovery of a victim stabbed 26 times and broken with a stone blow. So, on December 15th, 2016, two lumberjacks come to cut from the firebox to the chainsaw in a forest of the Fresnoys in the Jura. They cut down a tree, they cut it down, and then they go to get another one. And suddenly, passing through a pile of leaves, they see a shape, a mass of pink color. They approach. It's a leg. It's a human leg. Naturally, they call the gendarmes. It's a woman, completely naked, young, between 15 and 25 years old. Pink, with long hair. She is on her back, arms along the body and legs extended. And her face? My God, her face. It's unrecognizable. Her head is smashed, her jaw exploded, her teeth cracked. And that's not all. She was also stabbed in the neck and right flank. It's a massacre. It's not a slaughter to the chainsaw, but it's still a massacre. She was killed here. She was killed elsewhere, it's clear. She was also dressed elsewhere, because our guys searched the surroundings. They found no clothes. So she was killed elsewhere and transported here naked. Naked, which does not facilitate her identification. The only clue is a bracelet she wears on her right wrist. Very ordinary. That's not how we're going to give her a name. She has her legs perfectly straight. And the pubis is also well shaved. That's a woman who took care of her. She's not a marginal. So we first look in the police and gendarmerie files. Is a young woman missing in the region? I have one. A Japanese student who comes to Vesence. Narumi Kurosaki. She's been missing for 10 days. Japanese, you say? She doesn't have a Japanese face, the girl we found. Because you know what face she has. Her head is scrunched up, damn it. And I add that Japanese women often have white skin, but not yellow, as they say often and stupidly. And where are the hair? Maybe it's a color. We'll have to check. In any case, it's a track that should not be neglected. Especially since in the university residence of Besançon, where Narumi Kurosaki is staying, one of the neighbors heard screams the night of her disappearance. She's Japanese from Besançon, and maybe the woman was found massacred in the wood of the Fresnoys. It's an hour's drive. It's worth it. DNA will solve the question. It's about taking, for example, a hair on the brush of the Japanese woman in her ICU room and comparing her DNA to that of the corpse. And we'll know. You just have to be patient. And now, let's look at the autopsy. At the time, in order. First, the knife cuts. I counted 26, but none of them are mortal. What killed her is the cranial trauma she suffered, the blows she received on her head. What kind of blows, doctor? I'd say a stone. A big stone. In any case, a heavy object. And as for the face, I don't rule out the idea, but without certainty, that we could have hit her face against the ground. There's sperm in the vagina. And so we're going to have a DNA very quickly. And we have it quickly. And it's a man. But is it the DNA of the killer? Well, it's not certain at all. She could very well have had a sexual relationship consented with a man and be killed by someone else right after. Except that we identify the same DNA in a bloodstain on the foot of the corpse. How is it that no one reported the disappearance of this young woman? The Institute of Criminal Research of the Gendarmerie then devised an amazing technique. The experts asked their jury colleagues to send them a scan of the victim's face. You understand, from the scanner, we're going to be able to proceed with a facial reconstruction. A face, quite close, I think. It gives a young girl a very thin line and red hair. The gendarmes now have something to call for a witness. And so the face from the facial reconstruction is published in the press. And in the crowd, naturally, it rattles. Gendarmerie, I'm listening. Here, hello. I'm calling you because I think I know the young woman who was murdered. 150 calls that literally rattle on the newspapers. Can you imagine how long it's going to take to check all this? Including the closest calls, just in case. And in the end, it gives nothing. So the gendarmes rely on telephony. That too, it's a hell of a mountain to climb. The list of all the phones that hung up in the area of the Fresnoys is not on 24 hours. On 6 days at least. Because we don't know when the corpse was laid in the woods. According to the coroner, the young woman died on December 9th. She was found on the 15th. It is therefore the list of all the phones that passed in the area between December 9th and 15th that must be exploited. So of course, the Fresnoys is not the Parisian periphery. You cannot know the number of people who passed in the area in 6 days. In the short term, it gives nothing. And that's it. There is no other clue. And the weeks go by. 2 months after the discovery of the corpse, in February 2017, the Gendarmerie's investigation cell receives a promising call. A call from their colleagues from the St. Laurent Brigade in Grand Vaux. We may have a profile that may interest you. It's a lumberjack at home, supposedly to take care of his house. And then, as I know that in the case on which you are, I said to myself, I think it deserves to be checked. And a little bit. But they did a DNA test on him. And it's not him. In March 2017, 3 months after the discovery of the corpse, the gendarmes of the Jura resumed contact with their counterparts from Lausanne police. To discover that for weeks, 3 Romanian prostitutes have disappeared from circulation. And if the unknown was one of these 3? Finally, after a few days, we find 2. There is only one missing at the call. Her name is Maila. She is 18 years old. On a path, a walker brought her to us, and who told us something quite disturbing. I feel you. Well, at the time, we thought it was a hunter, so we did not go to see. And so, the identity card joined the objects found. And finally, it was sent back to the Romanian authorities. And if it was her, the unknown is Maila Malou. Swiss police kept the name of the lady who brought them the Romanian identity card. I told them there were 7 bloodstains. I even showed them a picture, at least 2 meters long on a meter wide. And the picture also allows us to find the exact place where the lady picked up the card. Come with me. Naturally, months later, there is no trace. But there is hope. We are lucky. It's concrete. It's for them, the concrete. We may be able to find blood in the thickness. And we find blood. And from this blood, we extract a feminine DNA. So, who put this girl on the sidewalk in the region of Lausanne, in Switzerland? The best thing is maybe to go to Romania, to question her parents, for example. Brave people, completely overwhelmed by the events. We start by reassuring them. Yes, you will be able to recover the body to bury it in your village. Can you explain to us by whom did Maila end up prostituting herself in Switzerland? If you know, of course. The parents swore at 80 for their daughter to go to high school. A good high school. And that's where she met the devil. A boy named Daphne Boshin. She fell madly in love with him. And from the moment she met the boy, little by little, she cut the bridges with us. And when she was 18 years old, well, she flew with him to Lausanne. And there, he put her in the feet of his cousin, Lucian. Lucian Boscianu, already installed as a proxenet on the banks of the Lake Lumans. And she ended up in an apartment with 2 other young Roubaix. From one day to the next, she started to earn a lot of money. In 1,500 euros per day. She gave half to her macro and kept the rest for herself. Sad life. Sad end. It's a good thing. Lucian Boscianu and his friends have been listening to each other for a long time. The Swiss police has them on the lookout. And so, we go back to the recordings. And it's very, very interesting. On November 30th, 15 days before we discover the body in France, the mackerel is worried. I don't know where Maila is. She's been gone since yesterday. I absolutely need to find her. So, Maila disappeared on November 30th. We can imagine that she was killed in the crowd. By whom? So, let's think a little. We know that the murderer got hurt, since we found his blood on the victim's feet. So either he got hurt during the murder, or he got hurt during the transport of the corpse. And there, the gendarmes start to go around all the hospitals in the area. one by one. A man who would have been presented for an injury, possibly by hand, around November 30th. Can you look in your files and make a list? Huh? Do you keep us informed? It takes a little time for everything to go back. But a month later, bingo. A call from Pontarlier Hospital. We have a patient who came to our emergency room on November 30th at 6:50 a.m. He had a major cut on his right index finger, and we had to suture him. They finally have a name. Alexander Verger. The gendarmes stand guard on his side. He is a 30-year-old young man who lives in Mout, in the Doubs, not far from the Fresnoys. He lives in concubinage with a woman with whom he has a 4-year-old child. He is a security agent. He crosses the border every day to go to work in Lausanne. And he is also a reserve gendarme at the Gendarmerie of Mout. And he is an unknown officer. In other words, he has no profile at all. And yet, I looked at his phone. The night of Mirella's disappearance and probably of her murder. He cut off his phone for several hours. And he never does that. They checked and proceeded to take a sample of your DNA. I'm going to ask you to open your mouth so that I take a little bit of your saliva with this cotton swab. And of course, we will compare his DNA with the bloodstain found on the victim's feet. According to the lab who was asked to get a pill, we will have the result in 5 hours. And in the meantime, interrogation. The name of Mirella Miloiu doesn't ring a bell? No. Strictly not. You were presented at the hospital of Pontarlier on November 30th for a hand injury. How did you do that? At night. I hit a goat on the road. And since he wasn't dead, I wanted to finish him off like I have a knife in the car. Exploring the phone of his darling, they noticed that on the night of the crime, she tried to call him 17 times. And that every time, she found his answer. That night, he wasn't there. He didn't come home. I was dead of worry. He arrived in the early morning. He was covered in blood. I told him to put all this in the machine. And I had the machine run. That's it. It doesn't leave much doubt about the guilt of Alexander Verger. And finally, in the late afternoon, I have the results. They are positive. The blood found on the victim's foot is that of Alexander Verger. And the DNA comparison confirms that the sperm found in the victim's vagina is also his. In fact, that night, I finished my work in Lausanne around 11:30 p.m. And then I took the Avenue of Geneva. I suppose you know what happens on the Avenue of Geneva. There are a lot of prostitutes. And right there, at the service station, I don't know if you can see where it is, I saw a girl. She was being beaten by a man. So I stopped. And I offered her to get in my car. To protect her. To protect her. And then, he said that in the car, she offered him a pass. And he said yes. They made a noise in a corner on the hood of the car. And there, in a black car, 2 black men would have appeared. One of them with a handgun. The rest is improbable. So they started to search my car. And they found the knife that I still have in the glove box. And one of them took the knife. He caught the girl. They moved away a little. And he killed her. And then they told me to get rid of the body. If I didn't do it, I would have been bored. I went to see the body. My knife was planted in the girl's neck. And it was by lifting it that I got hurt. And then he says that he put the body in his car with the firm intention to go to the gendarmerie where he is a reservist. Except that I realized that they were following me. So I panicked. I accelerated to escape them. And finally, I was fed up. I decided to get rid of the body in the cold. And according to you, who were these men? Well, his proxy, I think. The girl's proxy. And he had a guy with him. So what? So what? The truth? We doubt it. The night of the crime, the phone of the proxy of Mia Ilia, Lucian Bocianu, dialed his home. He didn't move from the evening and the night. His story doesn't stop. Alexander Verger. Not a minute. In the wake, the judge organizes a reconstitution where the so-called black men would have killed Mia Ilia. In the same conditions. 2 nights. A night without him. When the gendarmes extinguish the headlights of the car, we don't see it at all. I admit I don't understand, Mr. Verger. How could you give us so many details? We don't see anything at all. If you stay on this version in the trial, Mr. Verger, you won't convince anyone. The trial of Alexander Verger opens on December 9th, 2020 in front of the Assize Court of Dieu in Besançon. His lawyers have warned the press. They will plead the acquittal. They don't have a choice. Their client didn't move from 1 minute to the next. The trial of Alexander Verger, I'll tell you again. I didn't kill him. He didn't kill him. And it's necessarily the Bocianu clan, the clan of his proxenate. In theory, largely contested by the accusation. The Bocianu were worried about the disappearance of Miss Maluyu. They looked for him. All the hearings demanded. But no, Mr. Attorney General, look at their telephony. They didn't call him that much. And why? Because they killed him. They killed him because Miss Maluyu wanted to go back to Romania. They killed him because they were going to lose one of their best winners. While my client has no interest in this murder. No mobile phone. That, on the other hand, is true. By default, we don't have a mobile phone. The coup de grace is carried out by the psychiatrist expert. We are dealing with a personality that I would call psychopathic and megalomaniacal. And I add, intolerant to frustration. I consider that Mr. Verger presents an extreme danger with a major risk of recidivism. At the end of 3 days of trial and 3 hours of release, Alexander Verger is sentenced to 20 years of criminal detention. As he claims to be innocent, he appeals. Second trial in September 2021 in front of the jury. For the occasion, the parents of Alexander Verger have hired a private detective, Roger Mark Moreau. They broke their tie for nothing. Their son is even more severely convicted. 30 years instead of 20 years. You always have to think when you appeal. Apart from that, we still don't know why he killed her. And then, a big stone blow on the head. Boom. Why? I told you about the investigation on the murder in 2016 in the region of Lausanne in Switzerland of an 18-year-old Romanian prostitute named Maila Malou. Killed by a Frenchman, Alexander Verger, sentenced to 30 years of criminal detention, but who did not recognize the facts. And this story, I debrief it with you, Etienne Manteau. You are a prosecutor of the Republic of Besançon and you were a general attorney at the first trial. Since he is stuck by DNA, why doesn't he deny the evidence? Why doesn't he recognize it? Well, because he was assisted by his family, by his parents who were there during the trial who said that their son could not be the author. They described this father and this mother as a son completely idealized, extraordinary, the best of sons. Of course, we could quite hear this attachment to their son, to his parents, but I think it is one of the main keys to understanding this position of the accused. Faced with this look that he had on them, this idealized look of the parents, he could not be disappointed in recognizing that he had killed this young prostitute. On the other hand, I think his wife testified at the trial. She doesn't have many doubts. Yes, his wife indeed had much more rude remarks at the meeting of her husband. He had just had a child, but she mentioned a relationship that was becoming more and more distant, where he was more and more violent, intolerant to frustration, and indeed, after her trial. She signified that she was leaving him, which led to an attempt to commit suicide and detention of the accused, but he could not be saved. She showed herself very hard in her remarks during the hearing of the court. So, Etienne Manteau, we don't have a confession. And suddenly, we don't have a mobile phone either. I still haven't understood why he killed her and why he killed her with such violence. Because we still have to come back to the corpse, to the 26 stabs, to the big stone blow on the face, to the fractured jaw, etc. Why? Do you have the answer? I have a probable answer. Only Alexander Verger knows exactly what happened, but the investigation allows to bring quite precise elements. The analysis of the mobile phone of this young woman, of the victim, shows that she joined the Swiss emergency call number 117 at 0.52 on November 30th. We are in Crissier, in the suburbs of Lausanne. Mr. Verger explained it to her. He got her in his car, to a roundabout in Lausanne, and they left for the countryside. The sexual intercourse was 15 kilometers away. In Crissier, half a distance between where he got her in his car and where they parked, there is an emergency call that is picked up by Crissier's relay at 0.52, and the Swiss operator picks up and no one answers. This means that this young woman composed an emergency call at 0.52, and that Mr. Verger put an end to this phone call. This means that she was panicked from that moment on. This is explained by what these proxenates explained to her. They gave as an order that the prostitutes in Lausanne wanted to be able to exercise a fairly precise control of the prostitutes, and they were forbidden to go outside. Mr. Verger forced her to go outside and she panicked, which explains this emergency call, and which explains very certainly a sexual intercourse that happened in this countryside where it was dark at night in Soulens, where she was panicked, where the sexual intercourse must have gone wrong. And we look at this temperament, these traits of Mr. Verger's personality, intolerant to frustration. There probably was a very unsatisfying sexual intercourse. A rape, to put it mildly. A rape, to put it mildly, absolutely, and which certainly angered him. You should know that in the criminal history, the murders of prostitutes are quite classic and are generally committed by clients who are dissatisfied with the performance of the sexual intercourse. The prostitute is supposed to be a woman who will give them all the pleasure possible, and when the sexual intercourse is unsatisfying or too fast, or whatever, well, we regularly have murders of prostitutes that are committed at that time at the cost of anger, or of a badly mastered frustration, and I think, in this case, that this outburst of anger is closely related to this panic, this fear that animated this young woman, and this intolerance to frustration that was expressed by the psychiatrists at the accused. But, me too, it happens to me to be angry, and you too, no doubt. We are not able to slaughter someone with 26 stabs, and then to smash his head with a stone. So, psychopath, the term, I don't know. In any case, what the psychiatrists describe are things, conclusions, that we rarely read in criminal case files. And the first expert will talk about an extreme criminological danger, to such an extent that the defense will ask for a psychiatric counter-expertise. Since this first expert report is severe and unfavorable to the accused, and the second psychiatrist confirms a dangerous, will she say, in relation to a dangerously available violence, if he feels humiliated or put to failure. I know that these are the terms of the psychiatric counter-expert report, and this comes, in relation to the hypothesis I formulated, this comes directly to explain this passage to the particularly violent act. But that means that we had a 30-year-old man who was settled in Mouth, who crossed the border every day to work in Switzerland, who had a companion, who had a child, and who was a bomb who was just waiting to explode. Absolutely, but it's quite classic, and some who present personalities like that, fortunately, will never explode. But there, in this configuration of all power in which he settled progressively, and indeed his companion, she described a very pleasant relationship at the beginning of their relationship, a relationship that has not ceased to degrade over time. Explains this rise in power with a look excusing everything from his parents as well, and which can explain, in the eyes of the psychiatric expert, this outburst of violence. So I looked a little at the press, of course, to write my story. It's quite surprising, because in fact, as long as the unknown is unknown, there are a lot of articles, and from the moment the unknown is a Romanian prostitute, it doesn't interest anyone anymore. It's terrible. Yes, it's quite eloquent. Indeed, when the investigators were vainly looking to identify the unknown of the Frenois, it took them 7 months to get there. This file of the unknown of the Frenois fascinated the press, and as soon as we put a name on this poor victim, a young woman of 18 years old, a Romanian prostitute, unknown in France, well, it didn't interest anyone anymore, and during the trial, by the way, the civil party, because this family was very modest, was empty, and the media, little present, that is to say, indeed, it's terrible, but the value of the people is not the same, depending on whether we are a young Romanian prostitute or a young French woman incarcerated. So it takes 20 years in the first instance. You are there, at that moment, how much did you claim? I had already claimed the legal maximum, 30 years, since it was a homicide that was reproached to Mr. Verger, without aggravating circumstances. You have to know that at the time, the rules in terms of court of assassination for crimes punishable by 30 years were quite particular. If the court of assassination did not pronounce 30 years, the penalty immediately available for the court of assassination was 20 years. There was no intermediary. It was 30 or 20 or 19. Indeed, the risk was very important for the accused to appeal, to interrogate in this configuration, because the risk is that he takes the penalty just immediately superior, which was 30 years if he interrogated, and it is unfortunately for him what happened. Why does it only take 20 years? Because the jurors have a doubt, in your opinion. No, I don't think so. It's that pronouncing the maximum legally encouraged, it's always something quite rare when we have absolutely no judicial antecedent. In general, when we don't have a case, the jurors have trouble pronouncing this maximum legally encouraged. I think that the appeal he interrogated, the fact of reviving a second trial, his inability to recognize the evidence, ended up irritating the jurors. In any case, I think that's what explains that the jurors, in the appeal, finally decided to pronounce the maximum legally encouraged. The proxenet, the Boceanu, did they compare in front of the court? Did they testify in front of the court? They were heard as part of the investigation in Romania, since they were expelled from Switzerland and they left in Romania. They were heard, but in this case, whatever they say, Mr. Verger, it's not at all their DNA that we found on the victim's body. It's only Mr. Verger's DNA. And above all, we found him in a very particular place that was overwhelming for the accused. The nails of the victim's right hand had been cut because she had manifestly defended herself from her aggressor. And under the cut nail, we still found the DNA of a man, and it was Mr. Verger's DNA as well. Proxenet was also under telephone listening, and the Swiss listening was very clear on the fact that they had no intention of murdering this young woman. On the contrary, it was a young woman who brought them a lot of money and they took care of it. In any case, telephone listening shows very, very careful people of this young woman, who they later called in very trivial terms, hen eggs. They were heard in Romania and they explained that they were totally foreign to the murder of this young woman. Their statements were read on Proxenerbo during the hearing, but they were not summoned to testify in Besançon.